Colorado Community Health Alliance, or CCHA, is the Health First Colorado regional organization serving an 8-county area. CCHA supports more than 300,000 members enrolled in Medicaid by connecting them to physical and behavioral health services, care coordination, and community resources. We also have a network of over 6,500 primary care and behavioral health providers. At CCHA, we work as a team with providers and community partners to help ensure members receive the care and services they need. To learn more about CCHA, go to cchacares.com or follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn.
Hello and welcome to this session of the Colorado Behavioral Health and Wellness Summit. My name is Heather Martin, and I am faculty in the writing program at the University of Denver, where I teach writing to students at all levels. When I'm not teaching, I'm also a workplace writing consultant, helping teams from across professions become smarter and more efficient writers. I am so delighted to be here with you today to talk about my research into the power of prose. Like many, I have witnessed the ability of personal writing to transform both in and out of the classroom. Writing offers an outlet for emotion, it allows for purposeful reflection, and it shows almost immediate benefits to those who take up a writing practice. However, I've found it increasingly rare that we allocate time to this important, expressive, and reflective work. So the goal of this workshop today is to examine the benefits of expressive writing and also open up some time for participants to express and reflect. So the first thing I'll do as we get started today is offer just a little bit of background on these expressive writing practices and some thinkers who have influenced my approach. Then we'll walk through 3 different writing exercises to help test out some of these wellness writing practices. And then finally, we'll have some time for questions and sharing. So I am a writing studies scholar, and in my field, the term expressive writing stems from a movement called expressivism, wherein writing students write about their own experiences in the classroom, and that is the focus of our pedagogy. It was a popular approach in the late 20th century as writing studies scholars encouraged a move away from more formal, grammatical, academic discourse. Expressivism suggests that the personal voice is the primary mechanism that we use to construct meaning and to interact with the broader world, and thus that's what we should be doing in the writing classroom. Over time, the expressivist theories sort of fell away in favor for more rhetorical, persuasive approaches and approaches that emphasize process pedagogies and also writing as a metacognitive process. However, recently in 2017, writing theorist Eli Goldblatt kind of reignited interest in the expressivist tradition, asking us to reclaim expressivism as an important part of our writing studies tradition. And he also proposed that it was a pathway toward student and faculty wholeness. So in his article, he offers a critique of current writing approaches by saying, when we focus so much on professional and theoretical understandings of writing instruction, we can forget about the importance of 2 impulses that compel writers: the desire to speak out of your most intimate experiences and to connect with communities in need. He continues in his article to identify what he calls 4 legacies of expressivism in writing studies. The first legacy of expressivism is that expressivism is crucial to our sense of self and our sense of our own empowerment. So expressivist writing can be a tool of empowerment. He also indicates that expressive writing reflects a kind of socio-cultural authenticity, a kind of heritage that we should value and cultivate in our students. Third, Goldblatt notes that it can amplify underrepresented or historically silenced groups by way of community literacy projects and sees value in expressive writing in the community context. And then finally, Goldblatt argues that expressivism builds and sustains the literacies that are so critical to our work as writing teachers. So I read Goldblatt in 2017, and I thought that this made absolute perfect sense to me as a writing scholar. And I started to think about ways I might integrate or reintegrate expressive writing practices in my classes. And through that process of preparation, I encountered a theorist in an entirely different field. And that theorist is James Pennebaker. And Pennebaker is a professor in the Department of Psychology at UT Austin. And he's published a series of books that argue for the benefits of expressive writing, including Opening Up by Writing It Down, Writing to Heal, and Expressive Writing: Words That Heal. So essentially, Pennebaker is arguing for a version of expressive writing that in some ways is kind of like guided free writing. It's a little bit more prescriptive. You write continuously without stopping, without judgment, focused on one single topic. And so when he tried this practice in a clinical context, he found that it improved both mental health and also work performance and a series of other positive outcomes. So I found this really compelling as a way to think about how Goldblatt talked about expressive writing in the writing classroom and how Pennebaker talked about expressive writing in a clinical context. So I kept on digging into this research and found some even more exciting information. So not only did expressive writing lead to a reduction in stress for folks who had an expressive writing practice, it enhanced social relationships for people who had an expressive writing practice, and it also improved academic performance. And while I thought those were really interesting outcomes, maybe they weren't all that surprising. But the further I looked, I learned that that an expressive writing practice improved lung function among asthma patients. It led to an overall decrease in doctor's visits for healthy people, healthy patients. It led to stronger intimate partnerships, and it even reduced pain for people with rheumatoid arthritis, which is just impressive. Wow, I thought. It's also interesting to note that some studies compared guided free writing, or this expressive writing, to no writing at all, while others compared this guided free writing to journaling. So it's not just about writing by itself. There's really something special about this practice of expressive writing. So what is that secret sauce, that magic thing? Let's take a look. So in her piece, Stress, Expressive Writing, and Working Memory, Kitty Klein provides us with a kind of flow chart for understanding how expressive writing works. So if you look at that top row of the chart, you can see that when we have these stressful experiences and we have these stressful memories, they are not stored properly. Right? They don't get filed and stored away like other memories. And so what happens is they become too accessible to our brains. So they reemerge. So this is like you're trying to fall asleep and you remember that time, that girl in 5th grade, she bullied you at kickball. Like, Michelle, I still think of you, even though I'm in my mid-40s, right? So like these memories that just stay with us and they don't get filed away. So those are those kinds of things that expressive writing can help us address. So because they are too accessible, we bring them up all the time. And the more of these too accessible memories we have, they cause stress and they cause low-level thinking and reduced working memory. And so that's how these stressful thoughts work. But when we apply expressive writing to those stressful memories, it can help us organize our thinking about them. It helps us file them away and be able to move on. And by doing that, it gives us more space, more working memory to be in the moment and live in our lives and do problem solving with things that we are faced with in the moment. So if you think about it, it's like Marie Kondo for your brain, right? So when we think about this, our brains like order. Once we have dealt with something, once we have completed it, it gets filed away. But when that thing remains unfinished or unresolved, it takes up space, keeps popping up. We might think of these as intrusive thoughts, is another way that we experience them. And then also inhibition, holding things in, resisting that sharing, is associated with a host of negative health outcomes. So taken together, these two expressive writing traditions suggest that expressive writing can help us process and file our problems so that we can move on and feel better. And it can also help us to connect to our culture and our heritage and serve as a tool to amplifying the voices of others. So today I would like to focus on you. Our focus for these next 3 exercises will be about expressing you and your own voice as a means toward improving your own sense of health and wellness. So we'll walk through 3 different exercises. And this first exercise is about writing to express your experience. So in order to process, we need to get that experience out and figure out what we're working with. So what I would recommend is just taking a couple of breaths to sort of center yourself where you are and get ready for this experience. And then we're going to take 10 minutes to write. So you want to choose something to write about for this activity that is one of those stressful, persistent ideas that is a little bit too accessible to your brain. So it could be a personal or a professional problem. It could be a persistent stressor. It could be a specific incident. I've done this work in lots of different contexts with different folks, and sometimes people take up like really serious trauma that they've experienced, but lots of other folks take on more manageable issues, things that are just kind of really have been nagging them and bothering them over time. It's totally up to you what you decide to focus on for this exercise, but the goal is to really give this event or experience some time and some thinking and some writing. So whereas in journaling, you might write about a couple of topics, we really want to just focus on this one event or incident. So we're going to write continuously for 10 minutes and write about how you experienced this moment, this problem, this issue. And so as you're writing, you want to recount both the external details. So where were you, what was happening, the people, the sights, the sounds, but also those internal details. So what were your emotions at the time? How are you feeling? What were your responses in the moment? For this practice, you don't need to worry at all about grammar, spelling, or eloquence, right? The goal here is not to create a beautiful piece, but rather an honest piece that captures your lived experience in that moment. And again, the goal is to write without stopping. That's kind of hard, writing for 10 minutes without stopping. So do your best to do that. If you find that you become stuck at any point, students and folks I've done this workshop with find it useful to just repeat one word over and over until you kind of break out of that, because what we don't want to do is stop writing. So the goal is to continue writing for the entire exercise period. So I will encourage you to stop this video and take 10 minutes and really focus on that one incident, write without stopping. You can write by hand, you can type, whatever feels comfortable to you. So take that time and I will see you in just a moment. Welcome back. So I think the first thing we should do is really just take a moment to acknowledge the space that you have created between the problem and you. It used to just be in here. Now it is here. Now it is out on the screen. It is out on the page. And there is a distance between what happened and you. You've created a productive space where you can really look at this event or this stressor or this incident. If we want to return to the Marie Kondo metaphor, you've pulled the drawer out and dumped it on the floor, right? Sort of it's out of its space. So were we in a real-time space, we would have a discussion about what that experience was. So I'll just encourage you now to think about, did anything happen or change as a consequence of that writing process? Was there some discomfort in re-inhabiting the experience? That's pretty common. But was there any freedom in disclosing this as well? Were there any positive feelings that you felt as a consequence of writing? Some researchers who have talked about this work have described what they call the letting go experience. So just letting go of this tightly held thing that's been inside of you for so long can really be freeing. In one of these workshops that I did, a woman said, when asked these questions, she said, it's a lot less scary now that it's out on the page. So there's lots of ways you can respond and feel about this experience, but do take a minute to think about how you feel. Do you feel any differently from when you wrote it, before you wrote it, and how you feel now? And again, really acknowledge that distance that you've created between you and the incident so that now we can do some work with perspective taking and processing. And that brings us to our second exercise. So you have this incident, you've just done the free writing, and the purpose of exercise number 2 is to try to start to organize your thinking around this experience or this incident. So now, instead of just looking at this text as text you generated, try to think about it in the frame of a story. So what we want to do is we want to try to organize this story in order that we can wrap our arms around it. So again, I'll acknowledge that space that you created and then go back through and just read what you wrote. Re-experience that text as you just composed it in the last 10 minutes. And then spend a couple minutes with these questions. We'll take about, I recommend 5 minutes for this activity. So reread the text that you wrote and then identify the progression of the story. Where does the story begin? It doesn't mean necessarily where you started writing, but where does the actual story begin? What is the beginning of that story? And perhaps you didn't write the beginning. Maybe you didn't write the beginning, but what we're trying to do is locate different parts of the story. So where does it begin? Then what is that critical moment? In a creative writing class, we might talk about the climax, right? What is that critical moment or turning point in the story? Where is that? What is that moment? Find that moment in your expressive writing piece. And then think about, where does the story end? Where is the conclusion of this story? And I'll tell you that from my experience in doing these workshops, a lot of times that isn't actually contained in what folks have written. So start to think about, what is the end of this story, right? So I have the incident really clearly here, and maybe I have a beginning, maybe I have an end, maybe I don't. But start to map onto what you've written, a beginning, a climax, and an end. So take about 5 minutes to do that, and I'll rejoin you back here. Welcome back. So take a breath and think about that process. So did your expressive writing piece fit nicely into a story format? Again, in my experience, probably not. But can you piece together the different constituent parts of this story in order that you can make a little bit more sense of it for yourself? And then the next question I would ask as a consequence of that second exercise is, what remains unanswered when you're looking at this story? What parts have you yet to fill in? And do you need to add more to this story to really find that ending, to find that conclusion? And most folks do. So for our final activity today, exercise number 3, we are working as writers in an effort to process. So now you're going to look back at what you wrote and write that next chapter. So you're producing new text as you did in that first exercise. So this is going to be a generative activity. So take some time to now write the next chapter of this story or experience. So in this 10-minute writing session, you may acknowledge the progress you've made since the initial experience. You may acknowledge that space between whenever this happened and where you are today. You might project into the future. You might plan for ways that you can grow or learn from this particular experience. Or maybe you chart a course of action or a process to healing, especially if you feel like you have more work to do around this particular issue. So now we're processing, and we are taking a forward-looking orientation as a kind of exigence to action. So we've done this work of writing it down. We've done a little bit of mapping and tried to figure out what we have there and what still needs to happen. And now we're writing this next chapter. Where do we go from here with the information that we've generated as a consequence of these different expressive writing practices? And so again, the goal of this exercise is to chart a path beyond the story, write the denouement, the conclusion of the story. Where is that going? So let's pause and take 10 minutes for that experience. Thank you so much for taking time to participate in these 3 activities today. I hope that you will join me in our session, in our real-time session. I'll be available to answer your questions, to talk about the process, and really I would love to hear about your experience with these 3 different exercises. If you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to reach out to talk about this or any other writing-related topic. You can reach me via email at my email address on the screen. So I really hope you enjoyed this workshop today, and I do hope that you enjoy the rest of your experience at the Colorado Behavioral Health and Wellness Summit.
Hello, I'm Governor Jared Polis, and I think we can all agree that these have been difficult months for every Coloradan. Faced with today's realities of social distancing, it's so important to talk about mental health issues with your family and your friends. Colorado's LGBTQ community experiences increased risk for behavioral health issues, and too often that can include substance abuse. I support the work of Envision, You, and Rally Colorado, 2 groups committed to helping bring much-needed assistance to the LGBT community, because we know that early intervention, comprehensive treatment, and community support are key. You can find support and resources by going to www.envision-u.org.